Like some people with parenting, like they have like a child safety tether. It's kind of like, like to keep your kid in line. And I'm like, maybe Pinocchio needs that.
Wait till you taste one, dearie.
When you wish upon a star, you usually don't expect a star to answer. What? Hang on, let's start that over. When you wish upon a star, you usually don't expect the star to answer with a fairy, a talking cricket, a wooden puppet, and that immediately turns into trouble. But that's Pinocchio for you. There are no strings on this week's episode of Poison Apple Podcast. My name is Joey. I am the fifth best host of this fantabulous show, and I am joined by David.
Hey, howdy, hey.
And Gavin.
How's it going?
And Hannah.
Hello, beautiful humans.
And Jenny.
Hey, y'all.
This week we're watching Pinocchio, if you didn't figure that out from that little intro. We've already
watched it. That was a good intro.
It.
Look at you go.
We already watched it. Don't know why I said we're watching it. We're reviewing it. And we'll get into it. How was everyone's week?
Lovely.
Busy.
Oh, it was cold, but also busy.
Yeah.
I was about to say, I think 3/5 of us had 4 out of 5 of us had unusual amounts of snow in our area.
We had a
week,
snowstorm.
Right?
It just wasn't unusual.
It snowed a lot here. It was crazy.
The only Floridian in the group.
It snowed for what northern Alabama considers to be a lot, but being from
Same for
northeast Ohio,
Texas.
I was like, this is January, but whatever.
So, like I said, we are discussing Pinocchio, which was released by Disney Animation Studios on February 7th, 1940. It's based on the adventures of Pinocchio, and it had an initial budget of $2.6 million. It made $39 million. I don't know how true that is. ChatGTP, sure. And it says the lifetime box office was $84 million. Would you guys like to guess what the tomato meter for this movie is?
100.
I'm going to guess 90.
87.
75.
It is 100. It is,
No.
I think, the only Disney movie that has a 100.
That's crazy.
Yeah. The audience score is significantly
Good guess.
lower. It is 73. I do apologize if you guys can hear my son in the background. He is not a happy camper right now. My wife is taking care of that. But with that, we'll go into
Best Wifey Award.
We are going into the initial thoughts of the movie.
Okay, wait, real quick pause. I'm so sorry, we may have to edit this out. Is that loud for you guys?
I am definitely not editing this out, so that's on you.
Oh,
I told you I'm not
sorry.
editing anything.
No
I can't
worries.
hear anything.
Okay,
If it makes you feel any
going.
better, I can't hear anything, so.
Okay, keep it going. We're good.
Pinocchio
Poison
likes,
Apple Podcast behind the scenes.
Literally.
Pinocchio, like Snow White, was never really in my rotation as a youth, but I appreciate this movie much, much more.
For me, this one I feel like was in my rotation quite a bit as a kid. I remember always loving "When You Wish Upon a Star." I feel like the legacy of that song has become kind of a Disney anthem. And I've always been a fan of Jiminy Cricket, and I've never really been a big fan of the Pleasure Island sequence at all in this movie. So just knowing that going in.
My initial thoughts, I don't remember this becoming so unhinged so fast. I don't remember that aspect of this film at all. The music is iconic. The animation from 1937 to 1940 is absolutely insane. For as good as Snow White was animation-wise, Pinocchio blew it out of the water. Did great. but I just don't remember it becoming so unhinged.
I think for my initial thoughts, I never watched this really as a kid. I don't think I ever watched it like from start to finish. And I don't think it ever intrigued me as a kid, and even more so as an adult. What the heck was that? I think I'm kind of stuck between like, it was just hard for me to even watch it. So I think that's where I'm at with it.
For
Jen, what do you
me,
think?
uh, um, I didn't watch it a ton as a kid. I know I did, but I didn't like necessarily remember like all of the parts of it. So it kind of shocked me that like the nose growing didn't actually happen until like two-thirds into the movie, and that's kind
Mm-hmm.
of what people think first when they think about the movie.
Yeah.
But it was interesting watching it as an adult because you kind of pick up on some like darker themes and some other just adult things that you wouldn't catch as a child. So that was interesting. Again, the music is very iconic with When You Wish Upon a Star. Um, so it was kind of cool going back to that origin, but it was
I mean,
interesting to watch again.
this was like a subtle horror flick
Yeah,
in a way. Like it's I like I said, I did not remember it becoming so dark. I did not
Nope.
remember it becoming so unhinged. I think just the naive mind of a child didn't pick up on 90% of what's in the film.
Yeah.
But
Yep.
it's it's an interesting rewatch for sure.
yeah.
So there were definitely parts like kind of going back to what you were saying about it being like kind of like a horror flick. I said "Good Lord" more often throughout the course of this movie than I
Yeah.
did
Yeah.
Snow White. I was like, ugh, like someone greenlit that.
I do want to piggyback on what we finished talking about last week. There, I cannot wrap my brain around the fact that I think all four of you are about to give this a lower score than Snow White, and that just blows my mind. So, but
We'll see.
the last thing I do want to say before we get into it is I cannot wait for these opening credits to be done. I
Literally.
hate them so much.
I feel like that's the mark of like a
Everyone.
retro Disney movie. Like that's the
I
like
don't like the retro
like
Disney
it's how you
movies,
know.
so
Yeah, I'm beginning to think that the mark of the retro Disney movie is the first three quarters of the film is fine, and the last the last quarter, you're like, what is happening?
Like this got crazy so quick.
So quick. There's like, and there's zero pivot. It is literally just a deep dive.
Like, hey, we're doing this. Get on board.
So with that, we'll go into the yes moments. Like you mentioned, Gavin, the animation took a step forward. This movie is just stunning. So much of what they did. The animation of Geppetto making Pinocchio walk and dance, and then the animation of the view from it from inside Cleo's bowl. Like this is all, like
Mhm.
we mentioned so many times in the Snow
Yes.
White episode, this is all hand drawn stuff. How did they the shot of going through the village, passing all the buildings, all the children. It's crazy.
That
Yeah.
was actually I took note of one that it was at the very beginning, but where Jiminy is hopping towards Geppetto's, it's the same shot of inside Geppetto's through the window,
Mm.
but it becomes more and more in focus with each hop towards it.
That
And that
was
was like one of
the
the first things that I noticed. But it's super detailed when he gets into the windowsill, but it's the
Yeah.
same shot the whole time.
that was the thing that like really hooked me was that opening sequence with the hopping. I was like, I'm in. This is amazing.
You did it.
This is great. I'm hooked. This is awesome. And it stuck through. I mean, the animation, the fact that not only are they having to animate a marionette with all the joints and the different pivot points of the marionette, the strings, all that kind of stuff, but then if you go and you look at the intricacies of all the clocks of the coals, like each ember was emitting heat, and you could see the little heat patterns. Um, you go and you look at like the sheet movements when he's laying in bed and like he pulls the covers back and like it ripples. Like it's just every single aspect of the animation was just above and beyond what Snow White was. Now there were still some moments that I was like, oh, well, there's Snow White animation. But I mean, I didn't have as many I had more moments looking at it going, hold, I can't believe that this is hand drawn every single frame.
Yeah.
It is incredible.
And like as iconic as the all the clocks are, because that's another thing that people always remember is
Yep.
just the amount of clocks and how different they are and the attention to detail. As I was looking up some just like interesting things about Pinocchio, it said that Walt didn't even want the clocks like that. He was not on board for that. And the animators literally went out and got a ton of actual clocks to hang on the wall to kind of bring it to life to convince Walt that that's what they needed to do. And so he didn't actually get on board with that idea until they actually brought the clocks in, which I thought was interesting.
That's so
Because
cool.
because like it is such a big thing for the movie and what Geppetto does. But I also love the animation of when Pinocchio and Jiminy get on the ocean floor while they're looking for Monstro. I thought that had incredible attention to detail with the way the water was flowing on the ocean floor, with the way the light was reflecting into the ocean. Just so many
The
details.
distorted, like what you would
Yeah.
see if you were looking, like opened your eyes underwater, that's what you were seeing. Yeah, that was
So
incredible. Can we just talk about for a second with the clocks how every single one of those clocks go off on his wall, and then he goes, "What time is
I
it?"
wonder what
And
time
pulls
it
out
is.
his pocketwatch.
yeah.
I have that written
I
down. I thought that was
I
super
was
funny.
like, "Bravo,
I
right?
want to put a pin
Bravo,
in
that
that
was
because I
wonderful."
feel like there was a lot of just super funny humor
Yeah.
that came from Geppetto out of this movie. But Jenny, going back to what you said with, especially with like the water and like all the different like all that stuff, I actually read a fun fact because I did the same thing. I'm trying to do fun facts. Um, but all the money, I guess, that they made from Snow White, Walt immediately diverted all of that into updated technology so that way they could do more with camera panning across all of those painted backgrounds, like when they're zooming through the village and the kids and all the underwater stuff. Like all the money that they made from Snow White allowed them to do that. To be like, let's try this and see what happens.
And
Yeah.
Hannah, what did you like about it?
Honestly, for this one, I'm gonna have so much more yikes than I am yeses. I think the clocks were iconic. I think that Pinocchio is adorable. I love when he's like literally using Pinocchio like a puppet, and then once he turns into a boy, everything just turns tragic. So I think the beginning of the movie is gonna be my favorite. I mean, I love the like I got no strings dance, but for this one, I'm gonna have way more yikes than I am yeses.
Most of my yes moments were regarding the animation
Hmm.
and like the attention
Yeah.
to detail in the
Yep.
animation. The cat being under his nightcap and the little floppy part of his nightcap all of a sudden
Mhm.
wagging on the top of his head is just like brilliant.
I got two
Um,
full pages of yes.
Joey likes this movie, okay?
Yeah, yeah, he definitely does.
I also loved when Jiminy went like and it hid with the little wind up musicians and
Oh
like blended in.
yes,
Yep.
yes.
I loved that little part.
So
He uses his umbrella as a trombone twice in that first like 15
Mhm.
minutes of the film, and it's incredible.
So speaking of Jiminy, I'll use this as a jumping over point to the characters. Jiminy has a fantastic design, even though he looks nothing like a cricket, which apparently Walt kept telling them to make him look less and less like a cricket. Very good voice, good personality. That's about all the good I'll say about Jiminy Cricket. I absolutely love Figaro, even though I hate cats, but Figaro is adorable.
He's so
Cleo,
cute.
Cleo is great. Geppetto's design, Geppetto's goofiness, Geppetto's personality.
Accents.
He is fantastic. And then all the villains I think were pretty good too. Despicable as they are, they're villains.
Yeah.
There were a lot of them.
And Honest
Yep.
John and Gideon are a lot of fun.
I will say this: the thing that obviously we all can agree, I think, that the music throughout the film is some of the best music we're probably going to hear. Um,
No.
really,
No. I
really,
love you, but no.
Well, because that's
When You Wish Upon a Star is iconic.
It's
Right.
the
You have
opening
that one.
chime for Disney movies. Yes, the When You Wish Upon a Star in this, I don't ever want to listen to that.
see, I feel like the When You Wish Upon a Star in this, I have it written down that that's like the biggest mic drop at the beginning of a Disney movie,
Yeah.
I would say at the very least in terms of the credits coming before the movie. Like, I don't think any other Disney
I
movie that has the credits before the movie
And
sticks the landing nearly
most
as
of
much.
the awards that this movie won had to do with the music,
Yeah.
um, including Oscars, and you know, I think that said something along the lines of like 71 different awards, and I think, if I'm not mistaken, like 40 something of those have had to do with the music. So that's shocking to me.
Yeah, High Diddly D and No Strings on Me is probably all I can stomach, and neither one of those are in my Disney playlist. My 6 hour Disney playlist. There's no Pinocchio songs in it.
So,
Yeah,
but
not for me.
is that how we're judging iconic though? Because I feel like whenever if you had a Disney movie on mute, right, and the opening sequence started, you'd start whistling or humming When You
Mhm.
Wish Upon a Star.
I'll
That to me
I'll
is like
I'll say that that song is iconic. I'm not saying it's good.
I didn't say good. I said iconic. Oh no, I did say the best, but I meant the most iconic.
It is the most iconic. I will agree to that because
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
at the
yeah.
start of every single Disney movie. You can't argue it.
And saying they played at the grand opening of, or the opening of about every Disney park, and it's
Uh-huh.
The
featured in
cruise ship,
almost every nighttime show. Like it's
the
Yeah.
cruise ship plays it like as the horn,
Yes.
That is
literally
incredible.
everywhere. Yeah.
with everywhere there's a Mickey head hidden somewhere in that park, you'll hear "When You Wish Upon a Star" at some point.
Hmm.
I think No Strings on Me has become very well known.
I think that was the
Um,
better one, yeah.
Hmm.
so I think
Sorry.
I said the best, but I think what I meant to say is some of the most
Yeah.
iconic.
Mm-hmm.
But back to the point. For yes, the music and the animation were my two like big things. Sorry, I didn't mean to
Yeah.
derail the conversation there.
I'm gonna go into some of the emotional stuff now because I think even though it's emotional and heartbreaking, it's good storytelling and it's good emotion. So it's a yes to me. Like when Pinocchio finally realizes what's going on with Stromboli and just the pure hurt that he is feeling in that moment, and Stromboli just laughing, or no, Pinocchio laughing, having a great time, but then Stromboli throws him in the cage, and then it just snaps.
Yep.
Then he's like, "Oh!"
Mm-hmm.
And then for
I think
Geppetto to be right there and not know that Pinocchio's right there,
yeah, yeah.
and then Pinocchio's whistling because Jiminy Cricket told him, "Just whistle whenever you
Mhm.
need me," and Jiminy Cricket's
Yeah.
not coming. He does, but
They do a really good job in this film of like making the emotional moments hit a little harder, and I think that that has to do with the intensity of the topics that they are trying to hit on in this film.
hmm,
Um,
Well, and the sheer innocence of it too. Like,
yeah,
bear in mind, by the time that he's with Stromboli, he's had sentience for all of what, 24 hours, maybe?
right.
Like, 24 hours on this planet, like, yeah, you're going to get swindled a few times. Like, that's like, so the fact that he, within 24 hours, is locked in a cage and away from the only support system that he's ever known, like, I'd snap too.
They
I thought they
did
handled that very well.
they did a really good job of kind of encompassing the um, faults in humanity. They kept addressing temptation in this film, um, but I think it also kind of hit on abuse. It hit on Some very difficult topics to swallow, namely having to do with children, and abduction and enslavement. And like there is a lot of hard hitting topics in this film and that's why I say it borders on a Disney horror film, because in this film you
Yes.
see child endangerment, you see human trafficking, you see uh, uh, child labor, you see, I mean, or at least it's hinted at child labor, all the while trying to address temptation with tobacco inclusion and drinking inclusion, and um, but they do it's very tasteful in the way that they address these things through the eyes of such an innocent being, like Pinocchio. Um, but man, watching it, I was just going, this is a very gutsy film. Like it took a lot to greenlight some of this stuff.
Yeah.
And
The fact
it was definitely a statement by Disney saying like, we are going to talk about these things in this film, and that's what we're going to do. We are going to make this a meaningful film. Um, and I did like that aspect of it.
So there was a significant amount of film thrown out by Walt because it just didn't fit what he was looking for. And so the fact that what was left was, so, looked over and watched, and that's exactly what they wanted, because Walt actually tossed 2,300 feet of footage, which represented about 5 months of work. So I mean, when you think about it that way, just looking at it being like what we're getting out of it, and I know things were different back in that time period as well, so you have to take that into effect. But also, it was very dark and had a lot of those themes. And like I was saying at the beginning, it wasn't like just light and fun as a kid watching it. Like I knew there were, some kind of scary parts of it and, unsettling, but you picked up on so much more of that as an adult. And so I think even back then, parents were watching it with their kids and picking up on those themes much more than the children were when they were watching it.
And I think the intention of this film, honestly, given the time period, was more like a demonstration to kids of what happens when you don't listen and
Yeah.
what happens when you don't behave. It was very much like a 1940s, like, make sure you're behaving yourself kind of finger wag movie. But now watching it in 2025 going, holy crap. Like, these are
Yeah.
things that have become the central topic of a lot of political conversations that were featured in a film back in the 1940s. Like, it's insane that that underlying timeless attention to the negative aspects of humanity carried through for almost a century, right? 15 years short of a century. Is my math correct?
Yeah, that's right.
So that's just insane.
To take this on a complete 180, did anyone else find this movie as hilarious as I did?
Yes, I have a lot of humor bits written down here. I'm really glad you brought that up.
So the first one that I want to bring up is Geppetto making Figaro open the window, even though Geppetto is right next to it, and Figaro's a damn cat.
Yeah.
Him
And
just
there was
like
a lot
bullying
of
Figaro when Figaro's trying to sleep, I find super funny too. Like,
Yeah,
like this guy's just trying to
yeah.
get a solid 8 hours in,
Yep.
and Geppetto just won't leave him alone.
Oh, Geppetto's aloofness is just so great, because then when he when he wakes up and he's just strapped and he's looking to see, he goes, "Who's there?" And Pinocchio says, "It's me." And he goes, "Oh,
It's me."
and then goes back to bed.
the
He does the
freaking
same
random.
thing at the end of the movie too, when Pinocchio's like, "Hey, like, what are you crying for?" He's like, "Well, because you're dead, Pinocchio." He's like, "No, I'm not. I'm right here." He's like, "No, you're dead. Lie back down."
Yeah.
Yes, you are. Now go back to
the
sleep.
random pistol under the pillow sent me. I was sitting there going, "You're this guy. This guy is that really?"
And then he just like lit a match out of nowhere, like jumped out of bed, lit a match. And I was like, What is like? What
This man is
growth
running
of
drills.
gameplay?
He's ready.
Like,
Pinocchio,
I need some background on Geppetto.
Yeah.
Right?
Pinocchio catching himself on fire and going,
On
"Oh,
fire,
pretty."
yeah. Mhm.
Cleo
For me,
blowing smoke rings. Sorry, go ahead.
yes. I was gonna say for me, it was when like Jiminy was literally on the fox's head and the cat like literally goes to just whack the fox
Yep.
trying to get Jiminy. I thought that was like one of the funniest parts of the entire movie.
Him
And then
thumping
handed the
Honest
hammer to
John.
Pinocchio.
Him
Like,
thumping
here, hold
Honest
this.
John had me rolling. And then because his hat stuck on his head, he's yelling in muffled words the whole time.
Yeah.
Oh, so great. Gideon's hilarious too because then when Gideon's writing all the notes and then he keeps writing off the paper and he dots the I off the paper and then Honest John gets the paper back and it's just scribbles and he goes, ah.
I see.
Yeah.
Allergic.
Just as I suspected.
And if you pay attention to Gideon in the background, he's always ready to swing that hammer. He's always
yeah.
got that thing ready.
What made me laugh about this, there was one specific thing that Gideon did where he's trying to get the hat off, where he's like using the cane to like try and get like
Like a
leverage on
crowbar.
the hat, and then he swings the hammer around. Like, what's fun about old school Disney is that like for animals, they brought animals into the studio and like animated how they moved so that way they could get a gauge on how they did things. They did the same thing with people. So like that meant like some dude had to like sit on the soundstage and was like, okay, so like I've got the cane down here. If I have the hammer here, how do I need to swing it? So that way I'm just like sending this dude flying clear across the room. Like there was a group of like 5 animators that had to like wrap their brains around that potentially.
That's what I wish we had footage of. Like, I would love to see the behind the scenes, like watching that unfold.
Like would I swing
They
it this way or would I swing it around this way? And then, okay, yeah, okay, got
I
it.
don't know if you caught on to this either, but the animals had distinct representation that went with the theme of the film. So Figaro and Cleo and the donkeys were all adolescent and baby youngin animals, right? All of the evil that was in the film manifested in grown adult representation of those animals.
Hmm.
Um, so it was very interesting that you had that kind of underlying contribution to the theme of just like Figaro is adorable, Cleo is a cutie as well, and
Yeah.
that little bowl, it's adorable. Um, as horrible as the scene was, the donkeys were animated to be cute,
Mm-hmm.
like to be innocent
Mhm.
looking.
Yep.
Um, and but then you had like the sly fox, and it was that distinction was very noticeable for me, which also is something that I think was really well done. Because initially, I wrote down like just a random fox. There's been no other animals in this film, and then I started kind of putting two and two together as the film progressed. Um, and that was something that stood out. It was just like the brilliant use of imagery in this film is amazing.
Yeah. Um, Going off of some more emotion, I did love how Pinocchio didn't hesitate to save Geppetto when he got the message from the Blue Fairy that he was in the before Jiminy even finished reading, he was just poof, gone.
What I liked about that too, it wasn't just Pinocchio's drive. It was that Jiminy Cricket was like, I don't 100% agree with this, but I'm with you till the end of the line,
Mhm.
pal. Like Jiminy Cricket was in his corner the whole time.
Yeah.
Yeah. More about Geppetto. Dude was hucking tuna. He was just flinging those things. And did you see how many he caught in that short amount of time? Dude's in the wrong profession.
Another really funny one too, where like he catches Pinocchio, and Pinocchio's like, "Hey, I'm right here, Dad." He's like, "Don't bother me now, Pinocchio."
He says, "Don't bother me." Oh, man. And I guess the last thing I'll say before I go to the settings real quick is they also depicted Lampy's crash out so great. It was so heartbreaking. to watch him transform and just absolutely lose it. That was just a beautifully animated and depicted scene, as dark as the subject was. And as for the settings, I think they just did a really good job world building. The village is great. Geppetto's house is great. Monstro, the freaking inside of a whale they made seem great. Pleasure Island, Stromboli's show, Stromboli's train or carriage or whatever it was. There's just the world building's phenomenal in this movie. But that, I'm going to leave it at that. I have a lot more that I didn't mention, but you know, an island over here.
I had a couple things about Stromboli that I picked up on. I feel like we all know that Stromboli's not like a great person. Like we know that he's meant to be kind of an antagonist in this movie. But I feel like if you weren't familiar with the with the story, I feel like they did a really good job of not making it super obvious, because they don't really, like, when we're first introduced to him, when Gideon and Honest John are walking down the street, like there's nothing to lead us to believe that he's not a good person.
Mm-hmm.
And even during Pinocchio's number, there's nothing to necessarily allude to the fact that he is strictly an evil person. He has a short fuse, to be sure, but nothing inherently evil. And it's not really until, you know, he throws him in a cage and threatens to chop him up into firewood that we're like, oh crap, no, like he's actually like not really a great person.
He throws the axe and there's another marionette in the woodpile. And it's just like, whoa.
So I thought the build-up, but also like there was a build-up, but there was a very aggressive, like, oh no, he's not just like a guy with flaws. Like, no, like this is obviously a bad person. And also the difference, I like the difference in Geppetto's and Stromboli's take on marionettes and how they bring them to the world. Because Geppetto's obviously like, he does it one at a time. It's all about the craftsmanship and the wonder and the joy. Stromboli's just in it to make money. Geppetto calls Pinocchio his little wooden head. Stromboli calls him his little wooden gold mine.
Mm-hmm.
I thought like the differences in Geppetto and Stromboli. I thought the differences in Geppetto and Stromboli in their mindsets were very well done.
Mm-hmm.
So, how did Spider-Man 3 not be able to handle the amount of villains they had when this movie had 1, 2, 3, 4? It had 5 villains for an animated movie in the 40s. Handled it perfectly.
Oh, me over here trying to count who the 5th one was. I'm like,
I mean, I'm counting Gideon. I'm counting Honest John, Gideon, Stromboli, Coachman, and Monstro.
I honestly forgot Monstro.
Yeah,
Monstro.
I mean, Monstro's just doing his thing. I guess you don't have to consider him a villain, but he's not.
He's an antagonist. He's not a villain.
So I guess with that, we'll go on to yikes. I do have a page and a half of yikes. So the first thing I'll say is, what the heck was he making Pinocchio torment Figaro for? That cat's too adorable for that. I'm going to actually let Jenny and Hannah kick this off, because last time I feel like us 3 dudes dominated the yikes segment last time, and they didn't have anything to say.
Hannah, this is your time to shine, saying that you don't.
Ooh. Okay, well, like, for starters, I never really watched this growing up, so then I mainly just watched it as an adult, and I think, honestly, what the heck is Pleasure Island? Like, and I just feel like, you know...
That's fair.
Yeah, like, I actually don't remember watching this from, like, start to finish growing up, so I actually didn't know, genuinely, what was going to happen at all. And so I'm sitting here as an adult, having no childhood experience of ever really watching this, going, how is this a Disney movie? Because, like, literally it's this guy bringing kids to this island, and he's like, here, do this, but by the way, I'm going to turn you into a donkey. And I'm just like, yeah, this made the cut? Like, like, how did this happen? But honestly, like, for me, too, it was that Pinocchio just didn't listen. And I know, like, you guys made a great point. He didn't know who he could trust. But I'm just like, you know, like, some people with parenting, like they have like a child safety tether. It's kind of like, like to keep your kid in line. And I'm like, maybe Pinocchio needs that because, like he's supposed to go to school and then the fox comes up and he's like, hey, like, you should get into theater. And Pinocchio's like, okay, I'm not going to school now. And I'm just like, someone who needs to like help this kid out. I mean, Jiminy was trying, but Pinocchio just wasn't listening. So as an adult, I'm like, oh my gosh.
Two comments on that. One, child safety tethers definitely weren't a thing back in whenever this took place.
I didn't even have seatbelts.
We didn't have cars back when Pinocchio takes place. But I don't remember my other point. Oh, Geppetto sending him to school less than 12 hours after he became sentient. Wild.
Exactly.
Whoa, wild.
That's one of the big yikes for me. It was like, okay, it was never mentioned why he wanted Pinocchio to become a real boy.
Yeah.
That was never mentioned in this film. I know it's been addressed since, but that was never mentioned in this film. But then you've made it this big deal where the one wish you make upon a star is to have Pinocchio come to life so he could be a real boy. And then immediately, without hardly spending any time with him, you're like, have a good day at school.
Yeah.
Goodbye, my son. And it's just like, we pump the brakes and maybe spend some time with the kid before we're just like,
exactly.
I just got my greatest wish ever answered. I have a son. This piece of wood just came to life, but you know what? Let's go to bed so that you can go to school tomorrow. Even though you have no idea what you are or what the world is, I'm gonna send you there, and I'm gonna send you there alone.
going back to yes, real quick. Just the why every single time somebody tried why.
Where did that note go? I had a note that said they depicted that perfectly.
Like, exactly. Like, you got to go to school. Why? So you can learn. Why? Because it's what you do. Why? Like, it just was constantly being questioned, and I love that. But agree with Hannah. You're just gonna like talking about child safety tether. You're just gonna be like, I know you have no idea what this world is or what life is, but like, go walk to school now and enjoy your day. See you in 8 hours.
As a wooden boy.
And even though Jiminy was the conscience, he had literally just got introduced to Geppetto as well. It's not like a long friend of Geppetto's. And also the Blue Fairy didn't know Jiminy either. She was just like,
doesn't know Jiminy.
I was saying, like, no one knows who this guy is.
Geppetto
the Blue Fairy was like,
know Jiminy exists. They never interacted.
Yeah.
He doesn't even know that he at least has a conscience helping him. He's just sending him with nothing.
He literally just sent the wooden boy to school.
So, like, the Blue Fairy was just like, oh, you want to do this? All right, cool, you can do it. And then he just dipped. And I was like, you didn't even, like, make sure this guy was qualified. Like, you didn't do a background check. Like, you didn't do anything.
I have a lot to say about Jiminy, so I'm going to hold off on that till the end. Because there's a lot.
But I also love the fact that, and I don't know if this was intentional, but I feel like all they did for the fairy was pull Snow White's face and put it on a blonde animated woman. Like, because the animation for the fairy looked the same exact way as Snow White in 1937.
Yeah, I can see that.
And that was the only.
So it was the same person that did, like, the actual, like, physical human that, you know, they were basing it off of was the same person in both movies.
There you go. Because it was one of those things where I was like, literally all they did was transpose Snow White into this film and make her blonde. And it was the only animation. It was the only animation that looks like that. Everything else was a little more was more detailed. Was more, you know. That was another one where I was just kind of like, you really couldn't put more effort into that. Like, I don't.
So going off of that, I'll say, boy, did I hate the Blue Fairy. I hated her look. I hated her animation. I hated her character. I hated her voice. I hated everything about her. Like, she has all this power, but refuses to help in any way. Make him a real boy if you have the ability to do it. Nope, you want to make him do all this? Sure, whatever. Then when he gets kidnapped twice, you do nothing. And then when Geppetto is trapped, you do nothing.
That was the other thing too, is like she gave three criteria to becoming a real boy: brave, uh, truthful, and selfless. And like Jenny said at the beginning, it's crazy to think that the nose growing thing only happens for like 2 minutes of the film.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then the truth aspect of those three things was never addressed again. And whenever there was the opportunity to address that, Pinocchio was just like, "Oh, these? Oh, well, I got a tail too." Like he never said what he did. He never verbally
Ah.
confessed what he did. And so it was like brave, sure, he rescues Geppetto. Selfless, absolutely. Like he sacrificed himself for somebody that he cares about. Truthful, that was never addressed.
Yep.
That was never addressed. In fact, that was never brought full circle. It was left with him lying and then him going off again and then him sidestepping a question about donkey ears and, and tail. Like that was never fully truthful, you know. And
Yeah.
I can say as a parent, if I were to ask a question and my daughter would be like, "Well, you know, I don't know," and like walked off, you just lied to me. Like that's
Yeah.
that's lying, you
It's like,
know?
hey, what
And if
happened
you
here? But hey, look what
it,
happened
like,
here as well. Like, you
Right.
didn't answer my question. You just gave me more questions.
Sidestepping the question is dishonesty in a roundabout way, you know? So it was just one of those things where like the Blue Fairy was so inconsistent in both animation and character and expectations that it was just like, what are we doing?
Yeah.
I don't get it.
Um, why were there two animo- Why was there an anthropomorphic fox and cat? One that could speak and one that could not, and nobody cared? They just
Mhm.
exist in this
I
world,
had that
and they're
too.
the only ones? Okay.
And
Sure.
even when the donkeys started talking, this one still talks. Send them back.
yes.
Yeah.
Oh my god.
Um, there was a couple jabs at actors in this movie because
Hmm.
I think there was a strike going on or something, or they were demanding money or something. I don't remember the historical facts of it, but what does an
Breaking
Yeah,
the
actor need
fourth
for
I think that's
wall.
what
wages
it was.
anyways? And then I'd rather be smart than an actor.
Breaking the fourth wall and going, what can't they do nowadays? Like looking at the camera.
Mhm.
Like, okay, I see you.
Stromboli straight up didn't care that he was abducting a child. Pretty bad.
Mhm.
Pinocchio could have 100% gotten out of that cage. I stand by that 100%. I'll never look at that any
Yeah.
different. The gaps in those bars were
Oh
ginormous.
gosh.
He's literally sitting in the little cutout, three-quarters of his body, like literally just his butt is sitting inside the cage. He's leaning out of the cage. All he's got to do is go. He's out of the cage.
Pinocchio
Literally.
has the ability to create life, and nobody ever talks about that. His nose grows and he
Oh, because the
creates
birds.
birds.
Yeah, that's right.
Yes. Oh my gosh.
Apparently, Pinocchio is also all powerful now. Like
Lamp
phenomenal cosmic power.
Lampwick
And
looked
where are
like
the
a
birds
middle-aged
now?
child, and he sucked.
I still had an issue with all the wide shots.
Nah. Giving kids cigars and beers, pretty bad.
Can we
At least,
talk? Can we talk about that scene now?
yeah. At least they made Pinocchio get sick from it, but still, that's a bad look.
Yeah.
I feel like Hannah really got the ball rolling with Pleasure Island because that's where a lot of my yikes came from too. The Coachman empty Pleasure Island was way spookier than it needed to be. I also I was laughing because when they get out when they escape Stromboli and they're on their way home, I know all I had to do was wait 3 minutes to figure out like how does he mess this up?
Mm-hmm.
Like my guy, all you had to do was go home. And he was going home. I'm like, but I know he gets to Pleasure Island at some point after this.
Mm-hmm.
Well, how does he manage to mess this up? And they literally just kind of whisk him away, and that's the end of it. But like
Yeah.
the coachman, the donkeys, empty Pleasure Island, that whole sequence, I was
I
just
I
not
literally
cool.
researched whether or not they changed producers, directors, writers, or something midway through the film. Because to me, him escaping Stromboli, going back home. Sure, there could have been more that you dealt with, but it literally just kind of restarted the entire. Are you going to do the right thing? And I feel like it again, and this is why I said it. It's another example. Two movies in a row where the first 60 minutes were like phenomenal. In the last 30 minutes, I sat there going, "Hell, am I watching?"
Yeah.
Like it was just this is two movies in a row now. One just super rushed, and one just super unhinged.
Yep.
Um,
Mhm.
And
and I
speaking,
and I wrote down absolutely unhinged, and for no reason. Like it was so fast
yeah.
that it became unhinged.
What were those shadow demons? Why does Coachman have shadow demons doing his bidding
All the
Yeah.
guys that were closing the
Mhm.
doors,
and loading all the donkeys?
miscellaneous blobs.
We got talking foxes and shadow demons.
See, I think that was a religious representation.
Sure.
Mhm.
I thought that Pleasure Island was a religious representation of hell, all the temptation, all the
Makes sense.
joys that
Yes.
temptation can bring. Right,
Yeah.
you can sit back and relax and have a good time, smoke a cigar, drink some beer, you know. But then in the background, there's those shadowy hooded figures led by a guy that's dressed in red. Then you're getting thrown into the salt mines to work as an altered version of yourself where you can't speak. Yeah, I thought there was heavy religious undertones in that.
Yeah.
Um, and as much as it became unhinged and was crazy, I can kind of see that fitting in the theme of the story, being tackling the issue of temptation, tackling the issue of behaving and listening, following directions, doing what you're supposed to do. And here's what happens if you don't.
Hmm.
And then very quickly flipping the coin, going, here's what happens if you thought Stromboli was bad. Here's what happens if you don't. Um, this guy messed up not once, not twice, but three times. Like, look what happens, Um, and I think that there were a lot of like religious undertones with Geppetto getting eaten by a whale. I thought there was a lot of religious undertones in, that was his form of punishment,
Hmm.
lack of nutrition, lack of shelter. Um, you never know
Lack of
when your
nutrition.
demise
That dude
is.
had 100 tuna on that chest.
Well, he said that if the whale doesn't wake up soon, we're gonna run out of whatever. Um,
And the upper body strength on that man too to huck all
Right.
those
Can we
tuna
talk
into
about
that
that though?
bin.
Yeah. So I think while Pleasure Island was absolutely chaotic and nuts and freaky, I think that it served its purpose, but I don't think they had to go so unhinged with it.
Hmm.
Like it was absolute chaos.
Yeah.
It was a bit much for a children's movie.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
Alexander broke my heart. That scene is rough. Alexander the donkey, when he's just
Mm.
crying that he wants his
Oh
dog.
yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Ugh.
Hmm.
Almost got me, but it didn't. Cry Watch is still dry.
I want to know what else Hannah has on the yikes, because I know there's a lot of them.
Oh, I still have a whole
Oh.
bunch. My biggest yikes is
Let him
that-
roll.
My biggest yikes is that the coachman was never caught, and all those kids are still being shipped off.
What happens to
Oh my
him?
gosh, yes.
Because like Honest John, Gideon, Stromboli, the coachman, none of them like ever met their fates. Like they all just got away with it.
Yep. It's not great. um. Just
Well,
a small
and
thing.
I thought about that too by movies and that none of them really got their dues. And I think the only thing that I could really think of to make it not sting so much was that that wasn't what the movie was about.
Hmm.
I
Since the movie
understand.
was about Pinocchio trying to be a real boy and learning
Yeah.
how to be a good person,
Yeah, and what were they
since
supposed to do
he
about it?
So yes, since he got there kind of 2/3 of the way between being brave and selfless and like truthful, since he mostly got there, then by movie's end we accomplished the goal, but No, I especially the coachman. I was like, yeah, I wish we knew what. I don't know. Maybe a donkey kicked him into the sea or something. I don't know.
And I do agree. I think that the antagonist of the film was more temptation as a
Mm.
whole, with the physical manifestation of these five different villains. And I think the five different villains signified different levels of temptation and different levels of sinisterness, sinister nature, sinister acts, deeds. Anyway, um, like you had Gideon who represents thievery. Because whenever he was introduced to Pinocchio, the first thing he did was look in his back pocket and try to steal something. You had, um, oh, why is the fox's name slipping me right now?
Honest John.
Honest John. Honest John. You had him. His name is a direct conflict of what he represents. He represents lies. He represents falsehoods and you know manipulation. Um, so I just think that there is a subtle representation, or sometimes not so subtle representation, across these five villains that contribute to the ultimate antagonist of being temptation. Um, so I struggled a little bit with not knowing what their conclusion was, what it was that they were going to, what their fates would be. But then, if I go back and I think about it, I'm looking at it, I'm going, their fates were Pinocchio's overcoming of those individual issues.
Hmm.
That was their fate. Pinocchio overcame lying, kind of. Pinocchio overcame avoiding thievery and falling into that on Pleasure Island. He overcame fear. He overcame aggression. There was all of these things that he was able to overcome, and I think that metaphorically are the individual villains' fates, if that makes sense.
Yep.
That does.
I do want to say one more thing before I pass it off to you guys to say your final thoughts on Yikes. But the shot of Pinocchio face down in the water is wild. That is wild, and that is the second fake death in as many movies. So
I
There's a
had both of
theme.
those written down.
So I will let you guys say whatever piece you have on the Yikes before I get into Jiminy Cricket.
Um, I've said all I have to say about the yikes.
Yeah. Same.
All right.
I think the only other thing about the yikes that I have is kind of a segue, Joey, from what you said about Pinocchio being face down in the water. Is I was watching some of the extras of this movie after I was done, and there's an alternate ending where Pinocchio becomes a real boy on the beach, as opposed to back in the village. That like he goes up and he puts his head on Geppetto and like on his chest, and like Geppetto, we're led to believe that he's dead, but like the alternate ending is that they bring Geppetto back from the dead, but also Pinocchio becomes a real boy, and then they just kind of skip off on the beach.
Yeah.
But one way or another, there's still a visual of Pinocchio face down in the water on the storyboard. Like that was a non-negotiable. They were going to include that in the movie no matter what. And I'm like, why?
I don't care
Why
what
was
you do
that-
at the end of this movie, but Pinocchio has to be dead in the water.
Like we need
also
a
thought it
child
was-
face down in the water. That's it.
So I understand, like, when they went to, like, the bottom of the ocean, like, Pinocchio couldn't drown because he was made of wood, but then he is able to cry, and, like, there's some other things we like, well, if we're sticking with he can't do it because he's made of wood, then why can he do this?
Yeah.
And they established that he can't drown, but then drown him.
Right.
Which I concluded that, like, it was, like, somehow, like, impact, but, like, I would have thought, like, if there was somehow, like, impact that,
Geppetto
like,
would be
injured
dead
him.
too.
And also, like, wouldn't he, like tear into, like, like, I know, like, you have, like,
Splinter, yeah.
like, splinter or, like, do something, but, like, he's
Imagine.
fully intact.
Imagine if Geppetto found his head detached from his body. Oh,
I mean, he's already face down in water. He might as well, like... and then also just... Oh, go ahead.
No, keep going.
I was just going to say another thing. I know we're about to, like, deep dive into Gemini, but an interesting thing, I don't know if anyone else caught it, but when they first introduced Gemini, his umbrella was pink and had, like, the handle was like rounded, and then like a couple scenes later it turned purple and had like a right angle. So like I think the animation, because it was over such a big time, it got put aside and then they picked it back up, and things just kind of went a little differently. So I mean, it's not like a huge thing, but it was interesting that they didn't keep that consistent.
I'll throw one more yikes out there that'll segue into yours, Joey.
Okay.
Why did Jiminy just like give up when Pinocchio went off with Honest John and Gideon?
Yep.
That like he was just kind of like, see you later.
Yep.
Like, okay.
So we had a topic where we talked about the most overrated character in Disney history. I think I am changing my answer to Jiminy. I think Jiminy is by far the most overrated character in Disney history. He is praised as a character, and he is an unbelievably awful character. He failed Pinocchio time and time and time again.
Yep.
And gave up on him and got mad at him and gave up on him and got mad at him. It's just every chance he got, he did the wrong thing. I will go into it more if you guys want to say, if you want to react to what I just said there, but
yeah, I agree, because a lot of my yikes were about Jiminy specifically, because like how I remembered him, and then rewatching it and seeing how many times he just failed and let down. Literally, I have written down here, Jiminy didn't deserve the Official Conscience Award.
Yeah.
Because like
Facts.
there were just so many times where I'm like, Jiminy, what are you doing? Like, he needs you. And like I just don't think that he deserved that award. And I used to think of Jiminy being much more of a better conscience than what he ended up being.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
So give a little whistle makes absolutely no sense, because Jiminy never once planned on not being by Pinocchio's side. And even if he wasn't, whistling, you're not going to be able to hear him. As case in point, when he's on the dang coach, he can't hear him whistling. So that whole song, that whole sequence is terrible. And then on his first day, he oversleeps and doesn't go with the kid, and the kid gets kidnapped. Where's the next one? Jiminy got this kid back from being kidnapped. So his brilliant plan is, let's race home, and I'm not gonna go at this like, let's have fun and I'll let you win. No, he tried to cook this kid and just took off. So then he got kidnapped again.
And how was a cricket faster than a child in the first place?
And then he's the absolute worst again when he's looking for Pinocchio on the island is trashed. No one's making a sound, but there's one building that has a light on and there's lots of sound coming from. Does he think to check there? Nope, he keeps walking. Eventually he comes back, but awful. Then when he eventually shows up, he gets so offended that he isn't Pinocchio's best friend that he leaves him again. Why would he be Pinocchio's best friend? He hasn't been with him his entire life.
Fair.
And then he straight up swears in a Disney movie. So, hot take, I think What's up?
I thought that was brilliant, though. That was such good foreshadowing.
Yeah,
he was just like,
it was clever.
You jackass, and then walked out. And then later on, it was like, oh.
And then hot take, Jiminy was only in it for the gold star. He did not care about Pinocchio.
I think that's evident from and that was one of the things that I wrote down, not Jiminy negotiating with the fairy. Like the fairy just straight up gave you like this magical deed and changed your clothes from ratty to riches. And you're like, I want a gold star. Like, I want a gold medallion to stick right here. That's what I want. And like, it was material the entire time.
And he was just a flirt. Like, he, agreed to it because he found the blue fairy attractive. He was also like dancing and like trying to flirt with literal toys. Like any chance he got, he was just trying to flirt with something else, completely unaware of what's going on with Pinocchio.
But yeah, I am going to stand by that for the rest of my life that Jiminy Cricket is the most overrated Disney character of all time. Because he is a horrendous character. And he is only praised.
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
No one even. I've never heard anyone bash Jiminy for not being a good conscience, and so, like the fact that like, I just think these people are just basing it off of nostalgia and you know
And the song.
like the song, but I think more people need to go back and watch the movie because I think a lot of people's opinion would change if they went and watched it back again.
Yep. See, now they corrected it in the live action. They had him get stuck a bunch of times to where he couldn't do anything. The live action isn't very good, but at least they did that right.
So I feel like Jenny, based off of what you said about how people, they give him a lot of props for nostalgia's sake. I'll go and use that as my entryway in here because Jiminy Cricket's actually one of my favorite characters in the movie in Disney. Now he's not like my all-time favorite by any means. And all of you made amazing points for why he can be overrated. He was very quick to abandon Pinocchio, not be there for him. He definitely fell short on more than one occasion, and I saw that. It was very apparent to me in this particular rewatch. I think I really think the only leg that I have left to stand on, really, for why he isn't a complete awful character, though, is that with as much as Pinocchio made mistakes because he had only been alive for so long, Jiminy Cricket, like, all he really did was name drop the idea of a conscience.
Yeah, to be fair, it is not Jiminy Cricket's fault that he's a cricket. He's a cricket. It's the Blue Fairy's fault.
It kind of goes back to the Blue Fairy not being a super great person because she's like, hey, like, you know what a conscience is, and you're one of three conscious people in the room right now. Like, do you want to take this on? and he took it on when he wasn't ready, and that's on him. But like, being a conscience for a totally different person, like that's a tall order for anybody. Like,
And I do think he cares about Pinocchio.
Mhm.
Right? You don't put yourself through the journey that he was on
He wanted
just
that
for the
gold
gold
star.
medallion. But I think that he did care about Pinocchio. I just think that, and again, I'm focusing on the imagery here. You meet him and he's in tattered clothes, obviously not very successful at life. And then is given this massive responsibility where he is learning to fail, whereas Pinocchio is learning to live. So I think in a way, Jiminy's like having to learn step by step with Pinocchio. And so I do give Jiminy grace in that sense. But at the same time, Pinocchio's a child, and how much failing can you do before it becomes a problem? So I do see both your points.
Like I think there was also a lack of accountability from a lot of people, but I think after the first few incidents, Jiminy could have been like, you know what? I thought I could do this. I can't, like, this is not for me. Someone else needs to step in because, like, this is more than I thought it was going to be. And he didn't, and things continued to go wrong because he didn't, like, acknowledge the fact that he was not doing well. And also just, like, the lack of accountability from the Blue Fairy because she's the one that appointed him. She knew that things were not going well and
Right.
didn't like take that away from Jiminy and like help find someone else. Like she was just like, yeah, it's fine. They've got it.
Right.
So there was definitely a lack of, owning your mistakes.
I think there was a lot of failure in this movie on every account.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
I don't think there was a single character that full on achieved what they're not perfect. Geppetto just being like, okay, have fun at school. Fault. Jiminy falling short and failing Pinocchio, walking out on Pinocchio multiple times. Fault. The Blue Fairy not knowing what the hell she's doing. fault. But there's just I think it's a massive ode to failure and temptation and the craziness that is life. Um, and the fact that we're still having this conversation is tribute to that. Like I think it did its job really, really well.
Yeah, and that was a beautiful segue into our final thoughts. I really enjoy this movie. It's leaps and bounds better than Snow White. The only things that have a little bit of hiccup is music and I guess characters because of how much I hate Blue Fairy and Jiminy Cricket. But it's getting an 80 from me,
Okay.
which I predicted I would give it an 82. So
I um I think the animation was leaps and bounds better than Snow White. I loved all of the imagery and metaphors and analogies in this film. I think that it did a great job tackling hard-hitting issues. Um, we could talk about some of the faults of some of the characters, but I think that contributes to the addressing those issues. I gave it a 78.
nice. You predicted a 65, so I'm pleasantly surprised.
There you go.
So, in our last podcast,
Oh,
I actually
jeez.
guessed the number that I went with coincidentally, and I thought that was the funniest thing ever because once I totaled it all up, I was like, I guessed it. So,
42 is insane. A 42
it
for
was
a movie that has a
42.
100.
It was 42, and animation for me got the highest. I rated that 9, but everything else was a no go for me. I'm sticking
I
strong
forgot
with
to
my
bring a chair in
42.
here for me to throw.
I think we all knew it was gonna happen. So it wasn't it for me. I don't really remember it as a kid, and watching it as an adult, I was like, this is a big nope. Like those last 30 minutes, no. But honestly, like the message of it all, they tried, but I was just
The
like,
message is perfect. This is
no.
one of the best messages, and it's clear as day what the message is. Avoid
Yeah.
temptation.
Yeah. I was like, I just couldn't handle that. He just like he wouldn't listen, and I was just like, you know what? This just isn't the Disney movie for me.
Wow.
So for me, animation definitely carried it, along with the legacy,
Oh yeah.
but there were some other ones that fell short, and so I ended up giving it a 63. And I guessed that I was going to be in the 70s, didn't I?
65.
Oh, 65.
Awesome.
Okay, so I was also very close. I couldn't remember what I. Um, so I guess I was pretty spot on too with what I kind of thought. But I mean, overall, like the overall enjoyment of it, I wouldn't say that it's one that I'll look forward to necessarily watching again. So the overall enjoyment kind of brought it down because
That makes sense.
I just kind of watched it because it's on the list, but otherwise, I don't know when or if I would have ever watched it again. But I'll say going into it, whenever we get into like favorite characters, I 100% was betting that Jiminy was going to be my favorite character. And like I was going to like stand strong on that. I was like, oh, well, I already know the answer to that one. Not to spoil anything, so I won't say who it is yet, but it is not Jiminy. Because after I watched it, it was just completely different than what I had remembered.
All right, David.
So Joey, you will be very happy to know that my final score ended up being much higher than what I predicted. I think I think I said at the beginning of this episode that there's not going to be any pattern. It's going to be strictly vibes. I really did enjoy this one. I mean, you've all said it. Animation was a big part of this movie. And Gavin, you also said it with the characters that even though we found fault in just about all the characters, that there it was even their shortcomings that to me I still found to enjoy. That there were really only actually now that I'm thinking about it, really just one character that I was like, there's nothing redeemable about you. your animation, your motivations, your dialogue. Like, there's nothing that you bring to the table that makes me enjoy this. And I'll get that into that more when we talk about our favorite and least favorites. But still, the legacy is something to behold. I really like the music in this movie. And actually, I ended up giving this an 83.
Wow, look at you go. Predicted a 65, gave it an 83.
There you go.
I thought, because what did I say for Snow White? That it was 69. So yeah, I don't know why I thought I was going to enjoy this less than the Snow White, but yeah, I don't know.
Hey, to each their own, I guess. Everyone's entitled to their wrong opinions. Favorites and least favorites. What was your favorite moment and least favorite moment of this movie? Anyone? Anyone?
Jenny, you go first.
Okay. So I would say my favorite moment was
Gavin's gone.
specifically the escaping monstro, that whole scene. But like I said before, I did really still like being on the bottom of the ocean floor. But I did really enjoy the creativity with escaping monstro. Least favorite moment, I would go with Pleasure Island. That whole thing, not even just a specific moment. Just and I understand like the theme of it, like what they were trying to get at, but still didn't enjoy it.
Yeah. I can't go yet. I don't know. Someone else go.
Hannah?
Okay, so my favorite moment was when Geppetto dances with Pinocchio. I think that's like kind of a classic right there. And then least favorite, I think we all know what my least favorite is. It's just everything to do with Pleasure Island. I wasn't here for it, and I just like I couldn't look past it. So that's definitely my least favorite.
I figured it out. My favorite moment is going to be Geppetto telling Pinocchio that he's dead and he needs to lay down. It's so great. But my least favorite, I understand that like Alexander's scene is so heartbreaking and Lampwick's crash out and Pleasure Island, but that to me that's all integral to the movie. So if you take that out, you lose a lot.
Right.
So I think my least favorite moment is Jiminy completely whiffing and getting that kid kidnapped a second time. They could have done that better.
For sure.
My
You're
my
muted,
favorite
Gavin.
moment was probably Geppetto at the very beginning, him making Pinocchio, and the when he turns on the music box and he kind of like takes Pinocchio out for a spin when he's still a marionette. I feel like it's just such a fun sequence with the animation. And least favorite, I know it is it is important for the plot of the movie, but Pleasure Island I don't care for. But actually, Joey, you ended up changing my mind actually halfway through when you said that it was important to the plot of the movie. So I think actually my real least favorite is it's right before Pleasure Island, where they're on their way home, and it's not even that Jiminy doesn't look back. It's just the fact that it happens so quick that they just whisk him off to Pleasure Island. I'm like, you were so close. You were so close to this being fixed, and you just didn't.
All right, Gavin, you're up.
Apologies, I was having a sneezing fit and didn't think that would be a good addition to the podcast. My favorite scene was that opening sequence with Geppetto making Pinocchio. And it kind of establishes that love that he has for Pinocchio without Pinocchio even being a real boy. The fact that he, while that we don't understand fully the motivation, it's a beautiful scene, and the detail of the stuff is incredible. So I just love that. But the least favorite scene, and this is one that I haven't heard anyone say yet, the whole, and I don't think I mentioned this in my yikes, but the whole Monstro thing. How does he end up in the belly of a whale? And why is this relevant to the story besides the fact that it could signify, Geppetto's wrongdoing and his demise, but at the same time, it just kind of seemed random and like a very, um, for obvious reasons, setting wise, but not only that, just also with the like the theming of it was just kind of like, so you now have to send a marionette down to the bottom of the ocean to rescue an old man
Yeah.
because he got eaten by a whale while he was trying to search for him on land, but now he's stuck, so now they're gonna have to like, it just all kind of felt so
Yeah.
unhinged and random.
I can
And
understand that. The
when I said unhinged at the beginning of this, I wasn't referring to Pleasure Island as much as I think people will assume.
right.
I
That's
was
what I thought
referring
you were
to
talking
the
about.
I was referring to the randomness that was the last 30 minutes, including some of Pleasure Island. Um, but I mean, the whale had no fit in the film, and then all of a sudden it was in the film, and it was this big bad, and that just threw me off.
Yeah.
So,
So I understand that probably doesn't need to be in the movie, but when you said you don't even know why he's out on a boat, I'm pretty sure there was a cut scene where the Blue Fairy told Geppetto that he was on Pleasure Island, so I think that's why he was in the water.
mm,
So that would have been nice to know.
right.
Favorite and
Another
least
Blue
favorite.
Fairy shortcoming.
What?
Another Blue Fairy shortcoming.
Yeah.
She sends a letter that he's at the bottom of the ocean in a whale, but wasn't like, yeah, but I kind of told him to go.
Yeah, right.
My bad.
It's kind of my fault he's there, so you have to save him.
You have to promise you
Big
won't
whoops.
get mad.
So speaking of the Blue Fairy, favorite and least favorite characters. Jenny, you brought that up most recently, so let's hear it. Or did David bring
Yeah,
it up
so-
most recently? I don't know. Sorry, whoever brought it up most recently.
Either way, so my favorite ended up being Geppetto, just because of the love that, we said that he had for Pinocchio before he even became, to life. Even though he's the one that sent him off by himself right after he became real, the worry that he had when he didn't come home and going out into the rain and searching all over for him, and just kind of his quirkiness with the little things that he did with pulling out the pocket watch when his room is literally covered with the clocks and all the little just goofy things that he did. I thought that he really brought a lot to the movie, and is the parts that I did like were mostly around Geppetto's involvement. And then least favorite, I don't know. I'm really torn on this one because there were several that I just didn't like. But I'm going to go with the Blue Fairy because it wasn't even just the lack of everything, but even just her animation style. There were just several things that I just didn't really care for her. I just thought that she was a pretty big letdown in lots of ways.
So I'll go next. It is a tight race on both ends. On the favorite end, it is a tight race between, honestly, Honest John, Gideon, Figaro, and Geppetto. But Geppetto's going to take it because Geppetto's amazing. And then on the other end, it is a tight race between Jiminy Cricket, Blue Fairy, and the Coachman. But the Coachman is a villain, so he's supposed to be horrendous, so I am going to give it to the Blue Fairy. All the reasons we have mentioned before.
Okay, I guess I'll go next. But for my favorite character, it's obviously going to be Geppetto, just because I think his heart was always in the right place, and I think he just loved Pinocchio, and he shouldn't have sent him off to school, but I think regardless, he meant well. And then for my least favorite character, I don't think this is a surprise for anyone, but it's the Coachman, just because I think we all know why. It's something I just couldn't look past, and I just thought that was a bit much. So I'm standing strong with that.
See,
Uh,
now when we get to a movie that some people might not even know exists, The Black Cauldron, the Horned King is a horrendous
Mhm.
person, but I don't think anyone's going to make the Horned King their least favorite character.
Yeah.
That's just, to me, villains are supposed to be bad, so.
Yeah.
But I get it.
But
The
what,
Coachman,
but what
Mhm.
especially bad?
Coachman's pretty bad.
He was on my list too, just
He was on
because
my
of
list too. He was
what
he's
he
probably
was
second
doing.
from least. Which one of you two fine
I'll, I'll,
gentlemen?
I'll, was that?
I said, which one of you two fine gentlemen is going to go next?
I'll go next. I'll go and start with my least favorite, just because I feel like that's actually a little bit more open and shut. It is the Coachman. I alluded to it earlier. He brings nothing to the table from just dialogue, appearance, actions. Like, and Joey, you mentioned it, that what makes a good villain, and you can find likable things about them in certain Disney villains, and I can think of like four off the top of my head. But just, the Coachman does nothing to make him even sort of appealing as a character. And then favorite character, I am going to give an honorable mention to Geppetto because he is just a genuinely great character. But I will be in the minority, and I'm going to stick by my gun here. Favorite character, I am going to give it to Jiminy Cricket. I know there were issues with him, but I feel like given the very large task that he was given, he with very little notice, he didn't do a horrible job. And I feel like even for a cricket, he was probably the most like one of the more grounded characters in the entire movie because he had doubt, he had confidence, and he had, you know, maybe this sort of like self-image concept with like all the nice clothes and everything, like Gavin said, but like he did have Pinocchio's interest in mind. So the fact that he had flaws and good character qualities as well, I feel like just made him a very compelling character.
My favorite is going to be the same for those exact same reasons. Jiminy Cricket is going to be my favorite in this movie, simply because he embodies the real human experience. Despite being a cricket, you fail, you have flaws. Sometimes you are just awful in your decision making, but as long as you have the right motivation, I feel like that is a redeeming quality. Um, and I think that his struggle, not to be, cliche, but his struggle is real. It's something that I think is identifiable. So I think he's a great character. My least favorite is going to be somebody that has not been mentioned yet,
John
and that's
Bogle.
Lampwick.
Oh, good pick.
Um, I just think that he embodies what a bully is, and contributed nothing to the story other than to be a bad influence and um, bully Jiminy. And I mean, from the start, when you first meet him, he's shooting pebbles at the horses on the carriage. Like he's just, you know, horrible for the sake of just being, hey, do this, do that, do this, do that. Like he's the friend your parents don't want you to have. And I just think that that was kind of an odd inclusion, but kind of at the same time like grounded Pleasure Island. So I thought it was done very well, but still the least contributing character in the film, and therefore my least favorite.
All right, favorite and least favorite song. It's gonna be interesting. I'll go first. My favorite song is High Diddly D, The Actor's Life for Me, and my least favorite song. Oh, geez, who knows? I don't know. I guess. I guess When You Wish Upon a Star. Believe it or not.
There's a hot take.
Whoa.
Unless I'm forgetting something.
And all the listeners are gone.
Thank you for joining. No, my least favorite, most favorite are flipped.
Interesting. Is there only 3 songs in this?
Four.
Oh, there are no
For
strings on me. That's a great song. I forgot about
Yeah.
that one. I forgot about that one. There are no strings on me.
um,
Is my
Minor
favorite.
flip.
so my favorite is also When You Wish Upon a Star. And then least favorite, I went with Little Wooden Head.
Mm.
What was that one?
The one he sings when he's messing with Figaro
Oh,
Yeah, like
Mhm.
before Pinocchio becomes alive.
I understand like it fit with the movie, but like I wouldn't add it on my Disney
I
playlist
guess
to
I'll make
listen
that
to.
one my least favorite one, considering I didn't even remember it existed.
Yeah, same. Okay.
My favorite, I'm gonna go ahead and go When You Wish Upon a Star. Sorry, Hannah, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, you're fine. Go ahead.
Um, my favorite, I'm gonna give to When You Wish Upon a Star for previous reasons mentioned, and maybe I'm gonna go with a technicality on this one. But my least favorite, it was like I guess what you would call the reprise of High Diddly Dee. Not an actor's life for me, but it's Pleasure Island for me.
Mm.
Just it was. I feel like it was kind of a throwaway. It was kind of a repeat of like we're going to do the same thing that we did with you with Stromboli, but we're going to get you to a different spot instead. And I think High Diddly Dee, It's Pleasure Island for me are the only lyrics to the song.
Yeah.
It's only like 10 seconds, so. Hannah, let's hear
All
it.
right. So, I mean, for me, it was No Strings just as my favorite, just for the vibes of it all. Like, I kind of was like, okay, like, that's the only one that's really sticking out to me. And then, honestly, for least favorite, it's kind of like a little bit of everything else just because I genuinely go off of vibes and I didn't enjoy the rest of the songs as much. I mean, I know like Wish Upon a Star, it's a classic, but like it's just really what stands out to me. So, but I mean, if anything, I'll go with what Jenny said too because I just like I think we all know why on that one. But No Strings is definitely a favorite. Everything else just didn't really stand out as much.
Yeah, just to clarify, my now picks are my favorite being No Strings, least favorite being the song that Jenny said. And it's not that I
Yeah.
don't like When You Wish Upon a Star, because I do like the intro to Disney movies, and I like Christina Perri's version of the song. I do not like the version in this movie, which may be worse than what I originally said, but
Mhm.
whatever. I stand by it.
That's the song I walked down the aisle to at my wedding.
I'm sorry.
Not this version. It was
Yeah.
played on the piano, so it was just instrumental. So it was a different version, but it is that song.
We
He says, I walked down the aisle to this song and he says, I'm sorry. Good Lord.
we walked out of the ceremony to A Million Dreams from, what the heck is that movie called?
Greatest
Showman?
Showman.
Yeah, Greatest Showman. Pink's version. Great song. But that is going to do it. Next week we will be reviewing Fantasia. That
It's going to be a
what
good
do you
one.
guys think you're going to give that movie?
So real talk, I thought we were doing a double recording session tonight, so that was why I watched Fantasia already. So I am not going to give my prediction because I already rated it.
All right, that's fair.
81.
Oh, wow. We're going to have some differing opinions that day.
Yeah.
I have no idea. I've never seen it. So,
You've never seen Fantasia?
mm-mm.
Oh yeah, speaking of that, we never guessed if Hannah had ever seen this, but judging off what she said, I'm gonna say no.
Probably not.
Yeah. Well, that's why I almost was like, should I even say what I'm gonna rank the next one? But I'm like, I don't. I'll go with like 70, I guess. I don't know.
I think you are going to be greatly disappointed.
Oh, okay.
I mean,
We'll
it
see.
is a vital part of Disney's history, and like there are some good parts of it, and like music up there. So, I mean, while it's not one that people necessarily think of and often watch again, I do think that it's gonna get decent score for several factors. So I'm thinking it's probably going to be in the 70s for me. Because I mean, I didn't. The last time I watched it, it's not one that I hated. And especially like as a musician, be like having that like in me, I enjoyed Fantasia for that part of it.
I do not fall asleep to Disney movies very often. Fantasia puts me to sleep every single time. I'm predicting a 30 for this movie. I cannot
Ooh.
stand Fantasia, and I am so upset that I have to watch it again.
Oh my gosh.
So if you're excited to figure out, to see how well these guys love this movie and how much I hate it, go ahead and make sure you follow on Spotify, subscribe on YouTube, and follow us everywhere at Poison Apple Pod with periods in between each word. David, where can the people find you?
You can find us on Instagram, Facebook, Threads, and at the time of recording, TikTok. We'll see at mickey.and.mandy. And you can also find us on our shop's website, www.mickeyandmandy.com. See, Joey, I told you I would get it down.
Yeah, and that is a very good point, because at the time that this will air, TikTok is either still around or it has officially been banned. So
Boo.
we'll see what happens.
At the Dapper Disney Dad on Instagram and at the time of this recording, TikTok.
Hannah?
On most all socials, I pretty much got them all. I'm just heart clapping Hannah.
Jenny?
On TikTok, it's Jenny from the Talk with underscores between each word and one after. And on Instagram, bippity boppity bags.
Wonderful. And I am pretty much everywhere as well. I even just started Clapper yesterday. At People Call Me Joey with underscores in between each word. YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, everywhere. And I'm a travel agent. Want to go to Disney World? Let me know. We'll get you there. And email the podcast if you have questions or something. I don't know the email, so look in the show notes. I'll put it there. But if you have questions about Pinocchio or Fantasia or comments, let us know. And DM us or comment on our videos. Because, you know, we'll talk about it. But that
We're
is gonna-
engaging. We talk back.
We sure do. We talk to each other a lot, too.
Sure do.
We'll be commenting as ourselves and as the podcast back and forth. It's great. It's a real Spider-Man moment there. But that is going to do it for today's episode. I hope everyone enjoyed it. I had a good time. Jiminy Cricket sucks. Blue Fairy sucks. Have a great night. We'll see you real soon. David's dead.
Bye.
In the shadows we gather where tales are spun. With the Poison Apple podcast, the magic's begun. Friends watching movies, critiquing every lore. Grab some popcorn, join us and explore. Just one bite, you want more. Beware our tales are rotten to the core. Mystery and magic knocking at your door. With the Poison Apple podcast, there's so much in store.